Simone Ashworth was 34 years old, 10 minutes from walking down the aisle when she stepped back into the hallway to grab her grandmother's cufflinks and heard Andre's voice through the dressing room door. He was laughing, telling his best man exactly what he'd done the night before, at his bachelor party, in another woman's penthouse. Not just an affair, a signature, a deal. Papers transferring the equity in his company, the equity built on 2 years of Simone's credit, her savings, her name on every loan, into someone else's hands, effective the morning after the wedding. He called her the safe one, the one you marry, not the one you build with. He said she'd never even notice. 300 guests were already seated. The music was minutes from starting. Andre had no idea Simone was standing on the other side of that door, cufflinks forgotten in her hand, listening to every word. He thought he had 10 minutes left to become a married man. What he actually had was 10 minutes left of everything he thought he owned. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from today. And if stories like this speak to you, hit subscribe, because tomorrow's story is even more intense. The mirror didn't lie. Simone Ashworth stood inside the bridal suite at the Hargrove Event Center and looked at herself. Really looked, for the first time all morning. The dress was ivory silk, with a fitted bodice and a skirt that swept the floor like still water. Her hair was pinned up in soft, clean coils, diamond studs at her ears, a thin gold chain at her throat that had belonged to her grandmother. She looked like a bride. She looked like a woman who had finally arrived somewhere. "Hold still," Deja said. Her younger sister was crouched behind her with a bobby pin between her teeth and both hands working through the back of Simone's updo, fixing a section that had shifted. "You keep tilting your head and I keep having to redo this same piece." "Sorry." "You're not sorry, you're nervous." "I'm not nervous." Deja stood up and met her eyes in the mirror. "Simone, I'm fine." Their mother, Carol, looked up from the chair in the corner where she sat with a cup of tea going cold in her hands. She was a small, still woman with silver at her temples and a way of watching a room that missed nothing. "You've been fine since 7 this morning," she said quietly. "That's a lot of fine." Simone smiled at her mother's reflection. "That's what fine looks like, Mama." The room smelled like hairspray and fresh flowers. A bouquet of white ranunculus sat on the vanity table. Outside the tall windows, the October sky was a hard, clean blue. 300 guests were already seated in the main hall 1 floor below. She could feel the soft vibration of people moving, music starting, a whole ceremony pulling itself into place. She pressed her palms flat against her thighs and breathed. 34 years old, and you're finally doing this. She heard the thought in her own voice, and underneath it she heard something else, something smaller and less kind. He's 30. He's younger and sharper, and he could have had anyone. She pushed it down. That voice had gotten louder over the last few months. She knew exactly where it came from. Andre had a way, never direct, never anything she could point to cleanly, of reminding her of the 4-year gap between them. A joke at a dinner party about how he kept her young, a comment last spring, when she'd come home tired from a 12-hour day, that she needed to be careful not to let herself get too deep into the corporate grind before it aged her out. She'd laughed it off. She always laughed it off. She was good at that. She was also good at reading numbers, and the numbers she had built her life around for the past 2 years were Andre's. When his boutique real estate development firm was 9 months old and bleeding cash, it was Simone who co-signed the business loan the bank had refused him twice. It was Simone who restructured his vendor payment schedule at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. It was Simone, senior loan officer, the woman whose professional reputation was tied to every signature she put on paper, who pulled $95,000 from her retirement account to cover his operating costs while he waited on a deal that closed 4 months late. She had delayed her own promotion track to manage his books. Just until the company stabilizes, she'd told herself, just until he gets his footing. The company had stabilized. He had found his footing. And lately, when she asked about the books, he changed the subject. "There's a new investor," he'd told her 3 weeks ago, waving his hand in a way that closed the door on the conversation. "Passive money. It's handled, Simone. You don't need to worry about the business stuff." The business stuff. As if she hadn't been the business stuff for 2 years. She'd asked once more. He'd sighed. Actually sighed, like she was a student asking a question past the end of class, and said the investor wanted confidentiality until the paperwork was finalized. Then he'd kissed her forehead and told her to focus on the wedding. She had focused on the wedding. "Okay." Deja stepped back and looked at her with both hands on her hips. "You're done. You look ridiculous." Ridiculous good or ridiculous bad? Ridiculous perfect. Deja's voice went a little rough at the end. She cleared her throat and looked away. Carol stood and crossed the room and took Simone's face in both hands, the way she had done since Simone was small. She didn't say anything. She just looked at her for a long moment with soft, serious eyes. "Go get married," she finally said. Simone laughed, a real one. She turned toward the vanity to check her lipstick one final time, and stopped. The cufflinks. Her grandmother's cufflinks. Small, oval faces with hand-painted blue enamel, the ones Simone had promised Andre he could wear today. She had set them out last night in their small velvet case, and she had left them. She could see exactly where, on the counter in the men's dressing suite when she dropped off his boutonniere yesterday evening. She checked the time. 10 minutes. "I'll be right back," she told Deja, already moving. "What? Simone?" 2 minutes. The cufflinks are in the men's suite." She picked up the front of her skirt. "I'll be right back." She slipped out the door alone and turned down the hall toward the men's dressing suite. The door was heavy oak with a brass handle, and it was not quite closed. A half-inch gap sat between the door and the frame, enough for sound to move through, enough for Simone to stop with her hand raised to knock and hear Andre's voice on the other side, bright and loose, and full of the easy confidence she had spent 2 years believing in. She went still. "I'm just saying, last night was a good night." Andre's voice, relaxed, almost cheerful. "Everything got handled." "Handled how?" Terrence, lower, more careful. "The paperwork. Me and Priscilla got the last signatures done. The equity transfer is clean." A pause, the sound of something being set down on a counter. A glass, maybe, or a shoe. "As of tomorrow morning, the company structure is completely restructured. Priscilla holds majority equity. Silent, on paper, but majority." Simone did not move. "And Simone's name?" Terrence asked. Andre laughed. It was a short, comfortable sound. The laugh of a man who had already decided the answer didn't matter much. "Gone. Off every document. The business loan gets refinanced under the new structure next week. Her name comes off the collateral filing. It's clean." Another pause. "She'll never even notice, T. You know how she is. She sees what she wants to see." She sees what she wants to see. Simone's hand was still raised in the air. She lowered it slowly. "She funded that company," Terrence said. His voice was flat. "She pulled money out of her retirement account. And I appreciate that." "I do." Andre's tone didn't change. He said it the way a man says thank you when he's already walked out the door. "But Simone is the safe one you marry, T. She's not the one you build with. That's just the truth. Priscilla understands this business. She moves the way I move." A beat. "Simone is good for what she's good for." The hallway was silent around Simone. Completely silent. She could hear her own breathing. She kept it slow and even because that was what her body knew how to do when everything underneath was falling. Good for what she's good for. She had co-signed his loan. She had restructured his vendors. She had handed over $95,000 from an account she'd been building since she was 22 years old. She had absorbed his dismissals and his little jokes about her age and his sighs when she asked about the books, and she had told herself it was just pressure. Just the stress of building something, just what it meant to be a partner to an ambitious man. She stood in the hallway outside his door on the morning of their wedding in a silk dress that had cost her 4 months of careful saving, and she understood, in a way that was not dramatic and not loud and not anything she had words for yet, that there was no version of this morning she had actually known. "There's something else." Terrence's voice shifted. The carefulness became something tighter. "That property on Delwood, the inspection paperwork you had me sign off on in September? What about it?" "Andre." A pause. "I pulled my copy last week. Those load assessments were wrong. Not my assessments, the ones somebody changed. My signature is on a document that says a building passed a structural check. It didn't pass." Silence. "That's the property attached to Priscilla's investment," Terrence continued. "If anyone looks at that filing and looks at my license number—" "Nobody's looking. You don't know that." "Terrence." Andre's voice went smooth and final, the way it did when he considered a conversation finished. "Nobody is looking at Delwood. The deal is closed. The paperwork is filed. You signed what I asked you to sign, and everybody moves forward. That's it. That's my license, man. And your license is fine. Stop thinking so small." Nothing more from Terrence, just silence, the kind that meant he'd heard it and knew better than to push again. Not yet. Simone lowered her hand to her side. She looked down at the floor. The carpet was a deep burgundy with a gold pattern running through it. She stared at it for a moment like she was committing it to memory. Then she took one step back, then another. She moved quietly, the silk skirt barely whispering against the carpet, until she was several feet from the door. She did not knock. The cufflinks were still inside. She did not need them anymore. She stood in the empty hallway with her back straight and her hands still and her face composed into something that was not grief, not yet, and not panic, not ever. It was something quieter and colder and far more focused than either of those things. She breathed in. She breathed out. Somewhere below her, 300 people were waiting. She turned and walked back the way she had come. Simone pulled her phone from the small hidden pocket in her dress. Her thumbs moved fast. "Come find me. Side hallway off the main corridor. Now. Don't ask questions." She hit send and slid the phone back. Then she stood up straight, squared her shoulders, pressed her lips together once and let the expression settle into something neutral, something manageable. She had spent 12 years in a career where people watched her face for signs of uncertainty, and she had learned a long time ago how to give them nothing. She could still hear the faint murmur of the organ warming up downstairs. 300 people in chairs, flowers on every pew, her grandmother's cufflinks sitting on a counter behind a door she was never going to knock on. She heard footsteps. The men's suite door opened down the hall, and Terrence came out first, jacket on, boutonniere crooked. He was looking down at his phone. He almost walked past her. "Terrence?" He stopped, looked up, and the color that left his face told her everything she needed to know about what he'd heard himself say in that room, and what he knew she might have heard, too. He opened his mouth. "Don't," she said, quiet, even. "Not here." She stepped closer, just enough to lower her voice below the threshold of the hallway. "I was outside that door," she said. "I heard everything. Both of you." He closed his mouth. "I'm not asking you to explain it to me right now. I'm not asking you to do anything dramatic." She held his gaze. His eyes were guilty and scared, which told her he still had a conscience. That was useful. "I need you to go back in that room, finish getting dressed, and do not say one word to Andre about this conversation. Simone, every document he's ever had you sign," she said, "every text, every email, every piece of paper with your name on it that came from him or from that deal. I need you to keep all of it. Don't delete anything, don't move anything, just hold on to it." He was quiet for a moment. His jaw tightened. "The Delwood paperwork," he started. "I know about Delwood," she said. "That's exactly why I need you to keep it." Something moved behind his eyes. Not relief, exactly. More like a man who had been holding his breath for weeks and just received permission to acknowledge that something was very wrong. "Okay," he said. "Go back inside," she said. "Act normal." He nodded once and went. She turned back toward the hallway just as Deja came around the corner at a near jog, heels clicking fast on the floor, still holding her maid of honor bouquet. Her eyes swept Simone head to toe in one sharp pass. "What happened?" It was not a question. "Fine, Mama," Simone said. "Bring her here. Don't let anyone else see your face right now." Deja looked at her for exactly 2 seconds, reading her the way only a younger sister could, the way that required no words and missed nothing, and then turned around and went. Their mother arrived 2 minutes later. Her name was Gloria, and she was 61 years old and had buried a husband and raised 2 daughters alone and was not a woman who fell apart in public. She took one look at Simone's face and went still in the way that mothers do when they know. "Baby," she said softly. "The wedding is off," Simone said. "For now. I need to get out of this building before they start looking for me." Gloria did not scream. She did not press her hand to her chest. She looked at Deja, then back at Simone, and she said, "Tell me which door." Deja already had her phone out, pulling up the venue layout. She had toured this building twice during the planning process and had made a point, the way she always made a point, of knowing exactly where every exit was. "Service corridor, left at the end of this hall," Deja said. "It comes out behind the caterer's entrance. My car is parked on that side." They moved quickly and quietly, the 3 of them, Simone in the middle. No running, no raised voices. The silk dress whispered against the floor, and the organ music floated up from somewhere below, still warming up, still waiting for a bride who was already walking the other direction. They came out through a plain metal door into gray morning air and the smell of a catering truck idling nearby. No guests, no cameras, just a strip of asphalt and Deja's black sedan sitting where she'd left it. They got in. Deja pulled out of the lot before anyone on the inside had shifted in their seat. The back seat was cool and quiet. Simone sat with her hands folded in her lap and watched the venue disappear in the rear window. White tent, parked cars, the corner of the sign that spelled out their names in cursive. She turned away from it. "His business loan," she said. "The one I co-signed in 2022. I need to know if my name is still on the collateral filing, or if they've already moved to strip the equity before the refinance clears." Deja had her notepad open before Simone finished the sentence. "Talk," Deja said. Simone talked. Deja's apartment was small and orderly, everything in its place, books stacked by size, dishes in even rows through the open kitchen shelving, a whiteboard on the wall near the dining table covered in case notes and timelines from whatever matter she was working at the firm. Simone stood in the middle of the bedroom in her slip and bare feet, wedding dress hanging on the back of the door like a ghost of the morning. She pulled on a pair of Deja's old sweatpants and a faded Howard University shirt and walked out to the dining table without looking at the dress again. Deja had already made coffee. The box of financial records was open on the table. Simone's laptop was plugged in and running. They sat down. "Start with the business line of credit," Simone said. "The one Andre opened last spring." Deja slid the bank statements across the table, while Simone pulled up the digital records folder she had organized, out of habit, on a shared drive she maintained for anything related to their household finances. She had named the folder Whitfield Development, Shared. She had kept it updated like she kept everything, careful, consistent, documented. Andre had called that boring once, said she treated their life like a loan file. She opened it now and was glad she had. The first thing she found was the collateral disclosure addendum attached to the business line of credit Andre had opened in March. She had seen the original loan agreement. She remembered signing 2 pages of it at the kitchen table while Andre stood behind her and said it was routine. Standard, small business stuff. She hadn't reviewed the full packet because he had already started explaining why she didn't need to, which was something she recognized now as a technique she had seen before. In her own office, across the desk from people who were trying to get a signature without giving someone time to read. She had been a loan officer for 12 years. She had signed without reading. The thought sat in her chest like something with weight. She zoomed in on the addendum. Her name was there, her social security number, her signature, and next to the date, a notarization stamp she did not remember, on a page she was certain she had never seen. Deja. Her voice was flat. Deja leaned over, looked at the screen, looked at the paper copy in her hand. Her jaw shifted. "That's not your signature," Deja said. "The rest of it is," Simone said. "But not that page. That page was added." The room was quiet except for the sound of papers moving and the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. They kept going, statement by statement, document by document. The picture that came together over the next 2 hours was not complicated once you knew what to look for. It was actually simple. That was the thing that made it ugly. Andre had used her name and her credit history, her 11 years of near-perfect payment record, her low debt-to-income ratio, the professional credibility she had spent a decade building, as collateral on a business line of credit with a current balance of $63,000. He had structured the liability so that it sat in her name as a personal guarantor. Her equity stake in the company was what justified that guarantee in any reasonable reading of the documents. But the equity transfer he had finalized the night before at Priscilla Combs's penthouse, the one that erased Simone's ownership effective the morning after the wedding, did not remove her from the collateral filing. "It can't," Deja said, pointing at the relevant section with her pen. "Not without the lender's consent. And he never filed for consent." Simone already knew that. She had known it within 30 seconds of seeing the structure, but hearing Deja say it out loud moved it from the part of her brain that processed financial instruments into the part of her body where she felt things. She sat back in her chair. "So once the equity transfer clears," Simone said, "I own nothing. But if that company defaults, they come to me first." "Yes," Deja said. "He was going to let me walk down that aisle," Simone said, "spend the wedding night in a hotel, wake up the next morning as his wife." She paused. "And the whole time, this would have already been done." Deja didn't say anything. She set her pen down and let her sister have the silence. Simone looked at the documents spread across the table. 2 years of her work. 2 years of her credit and her savings and her patience, laid out in pages and rows and account numbers. "We tell everyone it's postponed," she said. "That's all. Postponed. We don't explain, we don't post anything. We don't let this go public until we're ready." Deja nodded slowly. "And Terrence?" Simone reached for her phone. She pulled up his number and pressed call. It rang twice. "It's Simone," she said when he answered. Her voice was steady and quiet. "I need you to meet me in person. Bring everything you have, every document, every signature page, every text message he sent you related to that deal." She paused. "All of it, Terrence. And don't tell him we talked." The diner was called Patty's. It sat on a side street in a part of town neither of them had any regular reason to visit. No office nearby, no friends, no shared history. That was why Simone had chosen it. She got there first, took a booth in the back corner, facing the door, ordered coffee she didn't plan to drink, and kept her hands flat on the table while she waited. Terrence walked in 7 minutes later. He was a big man, broad shoulders, careful eyes, and he moved the way people moved when they were carrying something they couldn't put down. He spotted her and came straight over without looking around the room first, which told her he was nervous enough to forget to be careful. He slid into the seat across from her and set a manila folder on the table between them. Said nothing. "Thank you for coming," Simone said. "I didn't have a lot of choice." "You had a choice," she said. "You made the right one." He looked at the folder, then he pushed it toward her. She opened it slowly, the same way she opened every document that mattered, from the top, in order, without skipping ahead. The first section was inspection paperwork. 3 separate properties. Each one had a certification sign-off with Terrence's signature on the bottom, stamped by the City Building Authority. She recognized the forms. She had seen the type before, from contractors who did commercial work near bank-financed properties. These were standard safety inspection clearances, required before a development could close certain phases of financing, except the inspection dates on 2 of them were dates Terrence had already circled in red ink. "I was in Atlanta on this one," he said, tapping the second page. "My cousin's graduation. I've got the plane ticket, the hotel receipt, photos with timestamps. I was not anywhere near that building on that date." "But your signature is on it," Simone said. Yes, it is. She turned to the next section. Printed text messages. The conversation thread was between two numbers, one saved in the header as A and one as P. The exchanges started 14 months ago. She read without rushing. The early messages were short, business-sounding. Phrases like "the structure looks clean" and "she won't ask about that account" threaded through talk about development timelines and financing windows. But by 6 weeks in, the tone shifted. Less careful, more familiar. Come by tonight and told her it's a site meeting, and then, 3 weeks after that, a message from P that said, "You should just lock it in with her for now. Keeps your credit profile clean while we build." Simone's hand did not move. Her face did not change. She kept reading. The proposal to Simone had happened 11 months ago. She remembered it clearly. A Sunday morning, the kitchen, coffee still hot, Andre down on one knee with a ring she had once mentioned in passing. She had thought it was the most attentive thing he had ever done. The texts told a different story. 2 weeks before that Sunday morning, P had written, "Engagement keeps her tied in without a formal partnership agreement. Cleaner than a contract. She'll feel too guilty to pull the credit while you're planning a wedding." Andre had replied with a laughing emoji and, "You know her better than she knows herself." Simone set that page down. "Priscilla Combs," she said. "How does she know my maid of honor?" Terrence shifted in his seat. "They went to college together. I found out maybe 4 months ago. I thought it was I didn't think it meant anything at the time." "She came to wedding planning meetings," Simone said. It was not a question. She was remembering now. 3, 4 gatherings at Keisha's apartment. The woman with the short hair and the careful laugh, who said she was Keisha's friend from college and had an opinion about florists, who had asked once, very casually, whether Simone and Andre had settled on a shared business structure or kept finances separate. Simone had thought it was just conversation. "She was reviewing your vendor contracts," Terrence said. "Keisha didn't know what she was actually doing. I don't think Keisha knew any of this." "No," Simone agreed. She didn't. Priscilla had sat across a table from Simone and asked about centerpieces while she was already holding the pen that would erase Simone's name from everything she had built. Simone looked at the remaining pages. She turned through them evenly, reading dates and figures and initials, assembling the structure of it in her mind, the way she assembled any complex loan file, piece by piece, until the whole picture was clear and there were no gaps left to fill. When she finished, she closed the folder and looked up at Terrence. "I'm going to make copies of all of this today," she said. "I'll give you the originals back." He nodded. "If Andre contacts you about that deal," she said, "I need you to keep responding like nothing has changed. Don't give him anything new. Don't sign anything new. But keep a record of every time he reaches out and what he says." Terrence was quiet for a moment. He looked like a man who had slept badly for weeks. "Yeah," he said finally. "Okay, I can do that." "Thank you, Terrence." She tucked the folder under her arm and left exact change on the table for the coffee. The knock came at 7:15 in the morning. Simone was already dressed. She had barely slept, but she had made coffee and gone through 3 more pages of loan documentation at her kitchen table. And when she heard the knock, she already knew who it was before she crossed the room. She looked through the peephole first. Then she stood still for a moment with her hand on the deadbolt. Then she opened the door. Andre stood in the hallway in a gray pullover and dark jeans, looking like a man who had rehearsed something on the drive over. He was still handsome. That had always been part of the problem. His jaw was tight, and his eyes moved over her quickly, checking for damage, calculating what he was walking into. "Hey," he said, like it was a Tuesday. "Hey," she said. She stepped back and let him in. He walked to the center of the living room and turned around. His eyes swept the apartment. The coffee on the counter, the papers she had already stacked and tucked face down under a folder before she answered the door. He didn't ask about the papers. "I've been giving you space," he said. "I know the wedding thing was... It was a lot. You needed time. I get that." "I did," she said. She kept her voice even. She sat down on the arm of the couch and folded her hands in her lap. He moved closer. That old warmth came into his face, the version of him she had believed in for 2 years, the one who used to rub the tension out of her shoulders after long workdays and call her the smartest woman he knew. "We can still do this," he said. "It doesn't have to be a whole thing. Courthouse. Just us, maybe your sister and my mom. We get it done before the end of the month, we move forward, nobody has to know there was ever a problem." "Before the end of the month," she repeated. "It's cleaner that way, for both of us." She looked at him for a long moment. He thought she was wavering. She could see it in the way his shoulders dropped just slightly, that small release of held breath. "I just need a little more time, Andre," she said. "Everything happened so fast. I'm still processing." He opened his mouth. "I'm not saying no," she added before he could push. "I'm saying give me a few days." That landed the way she intended it to. He nodded slowly, and the tightness came back around his eyes. Not anger, not yet. Just calculation. The same kind she had finally learned to recognize. "Okay," he said. "A few days." He left 20 minutes later. She locked the door behind him and stood in the quiet of the apartment and breathed in once, slowly, through her nose. The call from Lorraine came at noon. Simone was eating lunch she didn't taste when her phone lit up with the name. She set down her fork and answered. "Simone?" Lorraine's voice was warm the way a department store was warm, climate-controlled, impersonal, designed to make you stay longer than you meant to. "I've been thinking about you, baby. This whole situation has just broken my heart." "I appreciate you calling, Lorraine. I want you to know that Andre loves you. He has always loved you. Men they get scared, baby. They do foolish things when they're scared. That doesn't mean you throw away everything you've built." "What kind of foolish things?" Simone asked, calm, genuinely curious sounding. There was a small pause. "Business decisions. Things that looked one way and maybe weren't explained right. He's been under a lot of pressure with this investor situation, and I think he handled it badly, and he knows that." "The investor situation," Simone said. "You mean Priscilla Combs?" Another pause, longer this time. "I know Andre has been handling some business with that woman," Lorraine said carefully. "I've known for a few weeks, if I'm being honest. But Simone, that is a business relationship, and I did not want to cause a panic over something that—" "You knew," Simone said. Not a question, just the fact of it, placed on the table between them like something solid. "I wanted to let him handle it himself," Lorraine said, and now her voice had shifted. Less warmth, more posture. "I raised my son. I trust him to—" "You knew," Simone said again, "and you sat across from me at my bridal shower 6 weeks ago and said nothing." Silence. "I need you to think about the bigger picture," Lorraine said finally. "There are people who came a long way for this wedding. There is a family reputation to consider. You are a grown woman, Simone, and I am asking you, woman to woman, to be the bigger person here." The line held. "Thank you for calling, Lorraine," Simone said. She ended the call. She sat at her kitchen table in the noon quiet, the uneaten lunch in front of her, the afternoon light cutting a long stripe across the floor. Andre's mother had known for weeks, had watched Simone finish planning centerpieces and seating charts, and had said absolutely nothing. She picked up her phone and called Deja. "It's time," she said when her sister answered. "We need to move faster." Deja's apartment smelled like coffee and printer ink. By 8 o'clock that evening, her kitchen table had disappeared under paper. Bank statements, loan documents, text message printouts, the falsified inspection reports Terrence had brought in a manila folder that was already soft at the corners from handling. Deja had pushed her mail and her law textbooks to the floor to make room. Nobody apologized for the mess. Simone sat in the middle chair. Deja was to her left with a legal pad, writing in the small, controlled handwriting she used when she was thinking hard. Terrence sat across from them both, his big hands wrapped around a mug he hadn't drunk from in 20 minutes, watching the two sisters work like a man who understood he was in the presence of something careful and deliberate. "Okay," Deja said. She drew a line under something on her pad. "Let's talk about what we actually have." She went through it piece by piece. The co-signed loan, with Simone's name still attached as collateral, the side agreement transferring equity to Priscilla, dated the night before the wedding, the text records between Andre and Priscilla going back 14 months, well before the proposal, the falsified inspection paperwork, signed by Terrence, tied directly to a property involved in the equity deal. Terrence shifted in his seat when that last one came out. "I know," Deja said, not unkindly. "But you disclosing it first is the only thing that protects you. You understand that?" He nodded once. "I understand." Simone was quiet through most of this. She had read every page at least twice already. She was looking at the way the pieces connected, not individually, but as a system. The way a loan officer looked at a file, not for what was said, but for what the structure revealed. "There's something else," Deja said. She flipped to the back of her legal pad. "I talked to a paralegal contact of mine who does business and securities work. I had her look at what we know about Priscilla's fund, how it's structured, how the money flows." Simone looked up. "Priscilla isn't investing her own money," Deja said. "Not entirely. She manages a small private investment fund, other people's capital, outside backers who trusted her with their money and expect her to act in their interest." She let that sit for a second. If her role in the equity transfer becomes public, especially her part in structuring the side agreement and helping erase Simone from documents tied to credit she didn't disclose, those backers have a legitimate claim that she violated her duty to them. She used their capital to benefit herself. That's not just embarrassing. Deja tapped her pen on the pad. That's fiduciary exposure. Her own investors could pull out. They could demand accountability. She doesn't just lose face. She could lose control of the very fund she used to muscle her way into Andre's company in the first place. The room was quiet for a moment. "She thought she was untouchable," Terrence said. "They always do," Deja said. Simone leaned back in her chair. She was thinking about the bridal shower, about Priscilla sitting 2 chairs down from her at a restaurant table, laughing at something, reaching across to touch her arm. She had thought Priscilla was just a friend of a friend, someone on the periphery of her life. She had been in the middle of it the whole time. "It has to be in person," Simone said. Deja nodded like she had already arrived at the same place. "Agreed. Not a phone call, not a letter, not social media." Simone's voice was steady. "In a room, with the people whose opinion actually matters to him, his mother, his business partners, Priscilla." Terrence looked up at her. "You want them all in the same place?" "He spent 2 years managing what each person knew," Simone said. "His mother knew a little, his business partners knew nothing. Priscilla thought she knew everything." She paused. "Nobody in that room has ever had to sit with the full picture at the same time. That's what changes." Her phone buzzed on the table beside her, Andre's name on the screen. She looked at it once. Then she picked it up and answered. "Hey," she said, her voice softening just enough. "I've been thinking about what you said." He sounded relieved, already. "About needing more time? I hear you. But I talked to my mom, and she offered her house. Something small, just family and a few close people. 2 weeks from Saturday. No pressure, no production. Just us." "Andre," she let a small pause settle. "That actually sounds really good." A breath on the other end. That released tension again. She recognized it now for exactly what it was. A man who had been holding something back, letting it go because he thought he had won. "Yeah?" he said. "Yeah," she said. "Let's do that." She ended the call and set the phone down on the table. She looked at the spread of documents in front of her, the full shape of everything laid out across Deja's kitchen table, every page in its place, every thread accounted for. 2 weeks from Saturday, she said. Deja wrote it down. Terence gave a single slow nod. The date was set. Lorraine Whitfield's living room was done up like a magazine page, white roses and glass vases on every surface, ivory pillar candles, unlit because of the afternoon light coming through the shears. Folding chairs arranged in 2 short rows in front of the fireplace, where a small arch of eucalyptus and baby's breath stood waiting. Catering trays on the dining room table behind them, covered in foil, steaming faintly. Lorraine had wanted this. The intimacy of it, the chance to reset the story into something clean and controlled. 22 people instead of 300, but the right 22, the ones whose opinions traveled. Andre's 2 business partners, Marcus Webb and Glenn Chu, sat in the second row, both in jackets. Glenn's wife was beside him. Marcus had come alone. Priscilla Combs sat near the end of that same row in a cream blazer, her hair pulled back, her posture the kind that came from never once believing she needed to brace for anything. Lorraine had introduced her quietly at the door as a silent investor in Andre's firm, and moved on before anyone could ask a follow-up question. Terence stood near the fireplace arch in his best man position, his jaw tight, his hands still. Andre stood beside him in a dark navy suit. He looked good. He always looked good. He was watching the short aisle between the chairs with an expression Simone recognized, expectant, a little relieved, already framing the next chapter of a story he was sure he controlled. Simone had walked in on her sister's arm. She was wearing the ivory dress she had bought for the rehearsal dinner. Not the gown, not the veil, just the dress. Simple and clean, because she had known from the start of the last 2 weeks that she was not here to be a bride. She was here to finish something. The officiant, a small man named Pastor Giles, who Lorraine had used for every family occasion since 1998, cleared his throat and began. His voice was warm and practiced. He said the things officiants say at the beginning, about love and commitment, about 2 lives choosing each other. Simone stood at the front of those 2 short rows and looked at the room. Marcus Webb, who had shaken her hand at every company dinner for 2 years and told her she was the backbone behind the man. Glenn Chu, who had CC'd her on emails and thanked her for keeping Andre grounded. Lorraine, seated in the front row to the left in a blush silk blouse, her eyes bright with the performance of the morning. Priscilla, 8 feet away, watching with the careful stillness of someone certain she was invisible. Pastor Giles opened his small book. "If you're ready," he said, looking at Simone, "we'll begin with the vows." "Actually," Simone said, quietly, no raised voice, no tremor. Pastor Giles looked up. "I have something to say first." She turned slightly so she was facing the room rather than the arch. "To everyone here." Andre's expression shifted, a small crease at the center of his brow. Not alarm yet, just the first flicker of a man realizing the ground beneath him had changed texture. 2 weeks ago, Simone said, I stood outside a dressing room door 10 minutes before a ceremony with 300 people in the seats, and I heard my fiancé explain to his best man exactly what he'd done the night before. The room went very still. "The night before our wedding," she continued, Andre went to Priscilla Combs's penthouse and finalized a side agreement transferring majority equity in his company to her, effectively erasing my name from every financial document tied to a business I spent 2 years and $95,000 of my own retirement money helping to build. Marcus Webb stopped moving. "The equity transfer wasn't the whole picture," Simone said. "I'm also still legally tied, as collateral, to an active business line of credit tied to that same company. A debt with my name attached that I was never fully informed about. Once that equity transfer goes through, I hold the liability with no ownership. That was the design. She paused for just a moment, not for effect, because she wanted the next part to land clean. Terrence Boykin, who is standing right there, was asked to sign falsified safety inspection documents tied to a property involved in this same deal. His contractor's license, his name, used and then dismissed. She did not look at Terrence when she said it. She did not need to. He told me, and he kept every document. Priscilla's chin lifted slightly, a small, involuntary movement. Andre and Priscilla's relationship began 14 months before he proposed to me, Simone said. The proposal was not a beginning. It was a mechanism. He needed my credit, my co-signatures, and my income to stabilize the company long enough to secure outside funding. Once Priscilla's capital replaced mine, I was no longer necessary. She let the words sit exactly as long as it needed to. The engagement kept me in place while that transition finished. She looked directly at Priscilla now. And Priscilla wasn't a passive party. She personally helped draft the side agreement. She reviewed wedding vendor contracts from inside our own planning meetings in the same weeks she was structuring the paperwork to erase me. She knew exactly who I was throughout every single one of those conversations. The room was silent, not the soft, reverent silence of a ceremony, the hard, airless silence of a room full of people who had just understood something they could not unfamiliar themselves with. Andre had not moved. His face had gone carefully blank in the way that meant the calculation behind it was running very fast and finding nothing. Priscilla's hand rested flat on her knee, her cream blazer very still, her eyes forward and fixed on a point just past Simone's shoulder, the posture of a woman who had lost control of the room and was not yet ready to admit it out loud. Lorraine sat in the front row with her hands folded in her lap, and every drop of color had left her face. Marcus Webb moved first. He stood up slowly, the way a big man does when he's trying not to show how angry he is, and he turned toward Andre with the kind of look that doesn't need words behind it. Andre, his voice was flat. Tell me she's wrong. Andre opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Glenn Chu was already on his feet beside Marcus, his jacket still buttoned, his eyes moving between Andre and Priscilla like he was doing math he didn't want to finish. The inspection paperwork, Glenn said quietly. Which property? Andre started. It's more complicated than. Which property, Andre? Lorraine rose from her chair in the front row. Her blush silk blouse caught the afternoon light as she stood, one hand reaching toward the room like she could physically hold the moment still. Now, let's just. She stopped, opened her mouth again, closed it. There was nothing there. No version of this she could smooth over. No script that fit. She sat back down. That was when Terrence stepped forward. He had been standing at the arch the whole time, motionless, jaw set, holding a manila folder flat against his side. Now he walked to the center of the room with the steady, deliberate pace of a man who had already made his decision and was done second-guessing it. Everything she said is accurate, Terrence said. I'm corroborating it on the record. He opened the folder. This is the inspection report I was asked to sign, dated, my signature, my license number. He pulled out a second sheet. This is the text exchange between me and Andre asking me to sign it. And this, he pulled out a third, is a printed copy of the equity transfer agreement, with the date it was finalized and the address of where it happened. He handed the stack directly to Marcus Webb. Marcus took it. He didn't look at Andre when he did it. Glenn's wife reached over and touched Glenn's arm. He shook his head once, a small, tight movement, and didn't look back at the arch. Priscilla uncrossed her legs and stood. Her voice came out even, the practiced calm of a woman who had managed difficult rooms before. I want to be clear, she said, that my involvement was strictly as a business. Priscilla, Simone said her name the way you set something down on a hard surface. Not loud, just final. Priscilla stopped. "My sister Deja contacted your outside backers this morning," Simone said. "The investors whose money you manage through your private fund. She documented the conflict of interest, your undisclosed personal relationship with the business principal, your direct role in structuring paperwork tied to falsified inspection documents." Simone paused. "She sent them the same copies Terrence just handed to Marcus." Something changed in Priscilla's face. It wasn't dramatic. It was the small, specific shift of a person doing the calculation and not liking the answer. Then Priscilla's phone lit up in her hand. Then again. Then twice more in fast succession. She looked down at the screen. Whatever she saw there, she didn't share it with the room. She simply stood very still, the cream blazer immaculate, the composure still technically in place, but the thing behind it was gone. The certainty, the untouchable quality she had carried into the room like a second outfit. It was gone. Simone turned toward the front row. Lorraine had not moved. She was sitting with her hands still folded, her eyes down, as if the floor held something worth studying. "Lorraine." Simone's voice did not soften. "You called me 2 weeks ago and told me to be the bigger person. You asked me to stay quiet for the family's sake." She let that sit in the air between them. "What you were really asking was for me to absorb this quietly so it wouldn't touch you. So your friends wouldn't know your son used a woman's retirement money and her name on a debt she didn't understand to build something he never intended to share with her." She looked at the faces around the room. Lorraine's neighbors, her church friends, the women she'd sat next to at every one of these family events for years. "You knew. Weeks before I did, you knew. And you stayed quiet. That's not a mother protecting her son. That's a woman protecting her image." Lorraine's eyes finally came up. They were wet, but she said nothing, because there was nothing to say. Not in front of these people, not to this woman. Not today. The room began to empty. Not loudly. There was no shouting, no dramatic exit speeches. Glenn Chu touched his wife's back and steered her quietly toward the front door. Marcus tucked the folder under his arm and walked out without looking at Andre once. Lorraine's neighbors followed. Small, uncomfortable murmurs, the shuffle of chairs, the sound of people putting distance between themselves and something they did not want to be associated with. Andre stood at the eucalyptus art in his dark navy suit. Priscilla stood 6 feet from him, her phone still lit in her hand, facing a direction that wasn't quite toward anyone in the room. They were not together in that moment. They were just 2 people standing in the same wreckage. Simone picked up her small bag from the chair beside Deja. Deja stood. Terrence was already at the door. The 3 of them walked out together into the afternoon light, and no one called after them. The paperwork started on a Monday. Simone sat across from a real estate attorney Deja had found through her paralegal network, a small, precise woman named Patricia Osei, who wore reading glasses on a beaded chain and did not waste words. Simone laid out the documents in order: the business line of credit, her name on the collateral section, the equity transfer agreement, the dates. Patricia read without speaking. When she finished, she set her glasses down and looked at Simone. "This is actionable," she said simply, "on multiple fronts." "I know," Simone said. "That's why I'm here." They filed the first round of paperwork by Wednesday: a formal credit dispute with supporting documentation, a demand letter to Andre's company seeking damages tied to the unauthorized use of her name and credit history as collateral. Deja had drafted the letter herself the night before, and it was tight. 3 pages, no wasted language, every citation accurate. Simone read it twice before signing and felt something loosen in her chest. Not joy, not yet. Just the particular relief of watching something move that had been stuck. Andre called her cell phone 3 times that week. She did not answer. His lawyer called once. Patricia handled it. The regulatory inquiry came faster than any of them expected. The falsified inspection paperwork Terrence had handed to Marcus Webb made its way, Through Marcus, through Glenn Chu, through a single phone call to the city's building and safety office, into the hands of someone whose job it was to care about it. Within 10 days of the confrontation at Lorraine's house, an official notice arrived at Andre's company address requesting access to 3 properties for reinspection. Terrence had already submitted a voluntary disclosure to the licensing board, naming himself, naming Andre, providing the original and falsified versions of the documents side by side. His attorney had advised it. It was the only move that kept his license intact. It worked. He stayed licensed. Andre did not get the same consideration. By the end of that month, Marcus Webb had pulled his partnership interest. He cited the regulatory inquiry in writing and said nothing beyond what the letter required. Glenn Chu followed 2 days later with a similar letter. Andre's company, which had existed on the strength of those relationships and Priscilla's capital, had neither. Priscilla's situation moved on its own track. 2 of her fund's largest outside backers had already begun pulling support before the confrontation was a week old. Deja's outreach had been specific and documented. She hadn't exaggerated, hadn't editorialized, had simply forwarded the relevant paperwork with a short explanatory note and let the conflict of interest speak for itself. By the 3rd week, a 3rd backer submitted a formal request for an internal audit of the fund's recent dealings. Priscilla fought it. She had the composure for it and the vocabulary, and she used both. It didn't matter. The audit happened anyway. The findings did not become public record. They didn't need to. In the private world Priscilla had built her reputation inside, word moved faster than any press release. She wasn't indicted. She wasn't arrested. She was simply no longer trusted with the capital that had made her powerful. And without that capital, she was just a well-dressed woman in a very expensive apartment with a lot of opinions and no leverage. She stepped back from day-to-day management of the fund quietly. The announcement called it a transition. No one in her investor circle used that word among themselves. Simone heard about it from Deja, who had heard it from a contact. She filed it away and kept working. 1 year later. The office on the 14th floor had a window that faced east, and in the morning the light came in flat and clean across the surface of the desk. Simone had chosen this desk herself. Wide, dark wood, built for someone who worked with a lot of paper at once. There were 4 separate folders open on it right now, each one a different client, each one a property investment question she was being paid well to answer. The nameplate near the door read, Simone Ashworth, Vice President, Commercial Lending. She had stopped noticing it after the first week. That was how she knew it was real. Her consulting venture was smaller. Just her and 2 part-time analysts, but it was growing. She had built it carefully, the same way she did everything, taking only clients whose situations she understood clearly and whose goals were realistic. 3 of them had come directly from referrals. 1 had come from Terrence, who had started sending her the contractors and developers he trusted from his own network, the ones who needed someone to look at a deal before they signed anything. He called her on Tuesday afternoons when he had a question. Sometimes the call was 5 minutes, sometimes it ran an hour. Either way, he never wasted her time, and she never wasted his. It was a good working relationship. It was also a genuine one, and she didn't take that lightly. She was in the middle of reviewing a property appraisal when an alert moved across the bottom of her browser, a local business news digest she kept open out of habit. She caught the headline without meaning to. Whitfield Development Group formally dissolved following regulatory action. Below it, a smaller item. Former fund manager Priscilla Combs departs investment firm amid ongoing investor review. Simone read both lines once. She felt nothing that required her attention. She scrolled past them, picked up her pen, and went back to work. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I've got 2 stories on the screen that you have to watch next. Have a great day.